What's up, YouTube? We're back at it again with another video. Sorry for the long delay. We just had a really busy month. We're getting married in June. So between wedding planning, my wife's bachelorette, my bachelor party, we also got a new dog. Insert video here. So yeah, it's just been a really busy month, so I apologize for not getting a video out. And so I've kind of been going through a couple small things that my plan, which I think is still gonna be in this video. Sorry, fixing my shirt, look like a bum a little bit here. So my plan for this video is to be the first start, well, not first start, we did the first start video here, but it's gonna be our first sustain, idle, get the cams broke in, maybe even let it move under its own power if everything works as planned. But what I was doing to get to that point was basically my small checklist of the 9 million things that aren't really exciting enough to have a video. But as the list kind of grew, I kind of figured like maybe I should check you guys in now, and then we'll get on to the the fun stuff if we get in the car running. So I'll just quickly go through the things I've done, and now the big thing I'm left on is actually our drain plug. This hits our crossover on the exhaust. So what I'm going to do is actually cut the plate out that the drain plug's on and move it to the bottom here, because it's also kind of weird that the drain plug isn't on the bottom of the pan in the first place. So we'll correct that, and that's really the last big thing in this list. So one of the biggest things we didn't have originally, or up to this point, was any throttle cable. So what I've done here, bought this on Summit, it's a throttle cable clamp. And essentially I've connected the Volkswagen throttle cable from factory to a Subaru throttle cable that goes up and connects to our throttle blade. So now when I actually press the pedal, I actually activate the throttle. So that's a big win. Other thing we did was we did not have an engine ground, like a really good engine ground. So I made this ground with 8-gauge wire, ran it through our heat shielding, our heat sheathing, up to the battery. So now we have a really good ground at the motor. The other thing I've done is add any of our coolant lines that we need, as well as down here at the water pump, I've connected the coolant line, and let me see, I've also added this freeze plug for the line that we're not going to be using. And also, we've added a little bit of heat wrap on our coolant hose all the way up to the motor, but we've added this sleeve right here just where it gets close to where the exhaust would be. I have it removed right now, as well as the oil pan. But this is just to keep everything, we'll zip tie it, but to keep everything cool that's next to the exhaust. Alright, so I think it may have cut out, but you can see here, we moved the drain plug to the bottom. Came out pretty good. I'm happy with it. And we put a plug in right here where the drain plug used to be, and this came out actually really good, so I'm really happy with that. So the next thing we're going to do is just put a coat of paint on all this to match kind of, and also just prevent any rusting. And then we'll put it right back on the car, and we'll be ready to hopefully fire it up. Alright, so I'm not exactly sure where I left you guys, but we have this all cleaned up. Sorry, it's a little dirty just from pressure washing in the backyard. But we have the plug, the new drain plug, sorry, I should say the plug in the hole. Then we have the new drain plug location. So now the only thing we have left to do is seal it up and put it back on the car. So we'll do that now. Alright, so we're back at it today. Had a little trip over the weekend. I turned 30, so we went out to the Black Mountains out in western North Carolina. just hung out with the dogs and stuff there. But now we are ready to button this up and get it started. So we got the oil pan on, should be all set. The dipstick tube is back in. So what we have left to do is we're gonna tighten up the oil drain for the turbo, and then just we'll put the intercooler back on, and then we just have to plug everything back in. And we will get it fired up. Really the last big things on this is on our list, you know, for like a sustained idle, is we gotta fill it up with oil. We gotta check the spark timing, which we'll do once everything's all wired back up. And then we need to fill and burp the coolant system. So that'll all be pretty interesting. All right, so we got everything pretty much back together. I put the the intercooler back in. We buttoned up the exhaust. I was actually just priming the fuel system to kind of get a feel for how everything was going, and it seems like one of our injectors is still stuck open. I'll show you guys what I was doing to kind of test it. But the Mega Squirt has an injector test mode. So what I did is, currently the way it's wired is that the fuel pump and the fuel injectors are powered together. But you see here, I've actually disconnected my power for the fuel pump, just so I don't flood the engine. But what I was doing here, hold on one second, let me put my other fuel injector down. And the reason I'm thinking that this is stuck open, or that this fuel injector is failing, is because I definitely flooded the engine a couple months ago when I was actually doing my first start. And it sounds like something's still not exactly right with this fuel injector compared to the others. So I'll put you guys here if possible. Yeah, okay, there we go. And let me just give it battery power. Actually, I will bring you guys over here to kind of show you what I'm going through. So I've just connected the battery. I have my switch up on the dash. So now I have power to the car. This would be when the fuel pump primes, but like I said, I have it disconnected. And we can go into the output test mode, injector sparks, enable test mode, turn the fuel pump on, because that's the whole fuel system, the way the relay works. And so I'll first give you guys what a good injector sounds like. So this is just your injector testing. And I don't know how well you guys can see that, but essentially I can set it to each injector because I have it as sequential. So this is injector number 1. And you can hear that's pretty loud. Clearly working. So now we'll stop that and we'll go to injector 3, which I just have to make sure is plugged in real quick, because I was trying a different injector just to see if it was the wiring or not. And it definitely seems to be this actual injector. So if I plug this back in, which is a little tricky right now with everything kind of all back together, that's fine, because it's really just the coolant reservoir that's a pain in the butt. And that's pretty easy to take out now that we know we're going to need to probably start out this injector. Good. All right, so now we have injector 3. And you can even just barely hear that, which makes me feel like it's probably stuck open or jammed. So what we'll do is we'll swap it out with a better injector, and hopefully that will resolve any of our fuel washdown issues that we've had in the past and that we're kind of seeing again now. All right, I'm not exactly sure where we left off last night, but it started getting late. We kind of buttoned up what we were working on the rear, and we decided to turn the car around so that we'll be able to run it for once with it actually facing out of the garage, rather than every other time we've started it up, the exhaust has been facing into the garage, which has caused a lot of problems with just getting the exhaust fumes out of here and them not getting into the house, and just for safety purposes. So we have the car fully turned around, and really all I've done since then is I just calibrated my O2, my AFR gauge sensor, my O2 sensor. So what we have here is my gauge with Innovate, and it comes with a specific sensor, and this I got all with my MS3 Pro Evo, MS3 Pro Evo. And essentially, I had it calibrated. So what you do is you take it out of the exhaust. I can actually walk around to show you where it is. But so we have our O2 sensor right up there, you see it? And so essentially you take it out of the pipe, you remove the connector so that the gauge is not connecting to the sensor, power it up, that puts it into calibration mode, I believe. And then you actually, at that point, you can reinstall it, you still leave it uninstalled, you connect it, then it calibrates. It should go to 18 AFR, which is like basically peaked at regular air temperature, or air mixture of oxygen in the air. And then from there you can reinstall it and it should be calibrated. So that's where we're at now. So I should be able to start this up for at least to let us hear it. And then we'll have to kind of finish off anything for the coolant system, which really at this point is just getting a cap here, an expansion tank, which show very shortly, possibly today even. We're gonna make a shroud for our radiator here so that we can mount the fans. And because we're gonna try to idle for about 20 minutes, so that'll give it enough time that it'll definitely get warm enough that we'll need the fans to turn on. And then other than that, the last thing we need to do is actually, this is something I haven't even messed around with yet, is actually tune our IAC, our intake air control valve, I believe. So basically this is, or idle air control valve. So I'm not gonna be able to idle really well because this doesn't have like a set screw or something with like a carbureted engine where you just adjust the set screw to adjust the idle. This is actually done through our idle air control valve. So I'll need to kind of work on programming this so that we can idle the car easily, because right now, I'll start it up for you guys, but everything's just modulated by the throttle, which isn't ideal obviously for a running car, but for right now it should be fine just to have a little fun. Alright, we're probably still not going to be able to get to idle, but we'll do one startup just to hear how it sounds and make sure the injector's working right. So like I was saying, we're pretty sure that the motor flooded, although this time, this happened a couple times, and this time it actually didn't look as bad as it has in the past. But we did get a ton of gas out the exhaust, which you can see is kind of like left a mark here on the floor. And so whenever this happens, basically, luckily, this is like the easiest Subaru to change spark plugs on. So I take all the spark plugs out, turn the motor over a few times to basically push any of the gas out of the cylinder, and then I let it sit for a little while to let any other gas evaporate. So that's where we're at now. Basically put the spark plugs back in. I'm going to update the tune to not do that priming pulse, because I think the problem is the priming pulse is generally just for the fuel pump. But I think because the fuel pump and the injectors are on the same circuit, maybe, I'm not positive, but maybe what's happening is it's priming the injectors and opening those as well. I'm not exactly sure, but it is dumping way too much fuel, and otherwise I think the car would be running, but basically the spark plugs are just getting instantly like fouled with all the fuel in the cylinder. So we'll update the tune, we'll put the spark plugs in, and we'll try it again. But in the meantime, we also need to make a shroud for our radiator fans, like I said before, and kind of just close up all the other things, because this will get resolved. But in the meantime, we're never going to be able to let the car idle if we don't get this idle air control valve and the coolant system complete. So just going to show you a time lapse of all the random stuff I'm going to do from now until the car is actually able to start up again. All right, I'm not exactly sure where the camera turned off, but we're getting very close on the shroud. I've drilled a couple holes just to kind of start the opening for the fan, like for the actual air to flow through. We have all the bends up and we have them nice and square. I actually use my body hammer right here, body hammer and dolly to kind of square up the corners. I tried to use my hole saw, but it didn't really work well because I already had too big of a hole cut out here. So either way, we're just gonna finish this up. Then we'll get like a cleaner circle once we have this opened up. And then the shroud, we'll do the corners as well. And the shroud will be complete. I mean, maybe I'll put some clear coat on it just to kind of preserve it so it doesn't rust or anything. But it's getting pretty close already, so I'm pretty happy with it. So we'll just continue on, and then from there, we got our expansion tank. And so really that's pretty much everything we need for the cooling system. So we should be pretty close to being able to let this car idle soon. All right, so we are back from my wedding actually, and I'm gonna try to pick up where we left off. So we have the shroud all built. These are just kind of loosely bolted on. So what I need to do is finish tacking up the corners with the welder just to close that off. We need to make some tabs, and then we're gonna put a light coat of paint on it just to make sure it doesn't rust, because we did end up using steel. That's just what we had available. So we'll finish that, and then we'll be pretty much done everything for the shroud. We'll put our little reservoir, header tank, whatever, right here to allow for a high point to fill. And then we'll be done everything with the cooling system. We'll just check it, make sure everything's tightened up, and then we'll start filling it up with liquid. And then really what we have left to do is just the idle air control valve, get that kind of working with our Mega Squirt, because we really haven't messed with that, and then try to just get the idle settled, probably check timing, and we will be good to let this thing break in those cams. To break them in, it's going to run at like 2,000 RPM for 20 minutes. So, I mean, that'll be good anyways, because that'll be good test to kind of see the car warm up and everything, make sure the cooling system's working as intended. And then from there, once the cams are broken in, because that's supposed to be done without any load on the motor, but once those are broken in, we'll be able to actually take it for a spin. We're going to start with finishing off that radiator shroud, and then we'll see where we get. Alright, so what we have here are some tabs that we bent up. You can see they're not stuck to anything as of now, just have them bolted in place. And what I'll do is I'll tack them all, and here's one actually that's not even bolted down. Just made them on the brake with the same sheet metal gauge. I think it's 16 gauge or 18 gauge that I made this with. So we'll tack them on here, and then, you know, once they're tacked in place, we'll do finish weld. And then from there, it'll just be painted all and add some foam for sealing around, you know, the edges and to seal where the fan goes in. I may add one bracing piece across the middle here on the inside, but I haven't decided yet. But that's where we are now. So I'm going to do another time lapse, and you guys can watch me kind of start welding everything together and getting this finished up. Alright, this is pretty much finished product for the fan shroud. Nothing's too beautiful here. I was having trouble with the TIG, so I ended up just going to the MIG for ease. And I'll show you guys also way more rigid now that I kind of added this bracing piece in the middle. Again, not beautiful, but definitely gets the job done. So now what we'll do is we'll just wipe it all down with acetone, and then we will give it just a shine of clear, like a coat of clear coat. So while the paint dries for the shroud, I just want to show you guys what I'm making here. It's a little piece I made that's gonna hold up our expansion tank, and there's a tab here or something for originally for, I think, like I actually don't know, maybe it was for windshield washer fluid. By the way, I cut the tab so that would fit in here, and now I have a perfect pocket to weld it, you know, put some tacks in, weld it in here, and this will now be the location of where I put my header tank. So I'll show you me tacking that in the final fitment in a minute. And here's the expansion tank. You can see, nothing fancy here, nothing perfect, but it's exactly what we need. It'll fit just like that once it's tightened down. And should be no problem with the hood. So I'm happy. So all I have to do now is just mount up the radiator fans, and we can fill up the coolant system, which is pretty exciting. I just wanted to know, you guys can leave a comment below, why the hell does this have a hole in it? The cap has a hole. I'm probably gonna seal it up because I don't really understand. Yeah, but so whatever, we'll get the radiator fans on, and then the next thing we can really move to is trying to get this thing to idle. So yeah, let's get some water in here and we'll get it going. All right, so before we start this up again, I'm just going through the tables and I realized that some of the settings are a little off. So for the KPA for my map, for at idle and at max power, so I did the math wrong, I guess. So this should actually be closer. I was doing this on the computer, and this should be about 10, which would be 70. So if we put this, I'll say it's 65. I gotta also connect, so. I have the power on, but I just pulled my fuel fuse, so I don't have any issues there. But so we'll put this at 65, and then the high end should actually be 250. Okay, so this will be 65 and we'll do 250 to make our new table, and we will generate it. And that definitely changed things a lot, which I think is what we wanted, because it was definitely way over fueling and this dropped down the fuel. So I think that was actually in the right direction. So we will apply it. And I'll just remember that it was 35 and 250 before, so 65, apply, and we'll, burn that on, close, and then we're going to do the same thing for our AFR. So that was also in here, AFR table. That was just the fuel I was doing. So in here we'll go to tools, AFR table, generator, 65, 250, generate. See, it actually brought these down a lot, which I think also is what we wanted. So apply, burn, close. Alright, so that actually went a lot better than yesterday. One of the things I did was I completely turned off the priming pulse because I definitely think we have a leaking fuel injector. So we got a lot less fuel out, unburnt fuel out the exhaust when I turned off the priming pulse, because basically I think what was happening is the priming pulse was just blowing right through one of the injectors and causing the engine to flood. So we are getting it running, but without having the IAC working, it's really hard to keep it idling. So I think what we're gonna have to do is call it for here and have a separate video on just tuning that IAC so that we can get a really good idle and really be able to keep it running long enough to break in that cam. All right, so we're probably gonna wait for the next video to show you the IAC and the new fuel injectors. We actually just got a partnership with some people, so we'll be able to talk about that a little bit more in our next video. But we will end it on a high note. So I tried to test the fans earlier offline, and they weren't working, and I was really disappointed. And long story short, because they're wired in using injector as a signal, it actually grounds rather than giving a high signal. So I had my relay wired backwards. So now that I have it wired correctly, we can turn on one of the fans. Maybe not enough to stick it there. Then I can turn on the second fan as well. Now they're both running. So I can figure out some good stuff there, but both fans are working, so that's definitely just good news there. All right, thank you everyone for tuning in today. We're gonna end it here. I've already shipped out my second set of fuel injectors to a friendly company that we're gonna introduce you guys to in the next video. And I've already started to take apart the IAC so that I can show you guys how that process is done. So with that, thank you all for tuning in. If you liked what you saw, hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe for more content because the next video will be this car idling. I am sure of that. And I hope to see you again soon.